I feel like we've been warning about age verification, age assurance, and all of these things, which actually all mean digital ID coming to the United States until we're blue in the face. And I feel like we've been screaming into the wind with not enough people paying attention to this issue. And this is, of course, not a wide condemnation of our viewers. We know that you all take this very, very seriously. But unfortunately, a lot of the population is distracted with other things while this agenda steamrolls ahead. Well, as of January next year, Texans will have to submit to age verification to use Apple and Google services. This article comes to us from reclaimthenet.org. Google and Apple to enforce age verification in Texas starting in 2026. It says that tech giants Apple and Google have confirmed they will comply with Texas' newly passed age verification law, but both companies warn that doing so will come at the cost of user privacy. The legislation, known as SB 2420, is scheduled to take effect on 1st of January 2026. Under this law, app marketplaces and developers will be required to implement strict age assurance mechanisms that, according to Apple, will force the collection of personal data even for basic app downloads. Beginning January 1st, 2026, a new state law in Texas, SB 2420, introduces age assurance requirements for app marketplaces and developers, Apple stated in a developer update. While we share the goal of strengthening kids' online safety, we are concerned that SB 2420 impacts the privacy of users by requiring the collection of sensitive, personally identifiable information to download any app, even if a user simply wants to check the weather or sports scores. The Texas App Store Accountability Act sets out mandatory age checks and specific restrictions on users under 18. Developers will be expected to make structural changes to how their apps function and handle user data to comply with the mandate. To help developers adjust, Apple plans to update its existing declared age range API and introduce additional tools to allow apps to handle required consent procedures more easily. These changes are meant to align with the law while trying to reduce exposure of sensitive user data, Apple said. More technical information is expected to be released this fall. Google is taking a similar approach and has already launched a beta version of its Play Age Signals API. Through this system, apps will be able to receive information about users' age ranges, supervision status, and other relevant signals, but only in the states affected. In an earlier blog post, Google voiced concern over how the Utah law, which takes effect May 7, 2026, compels data sharing. The bill requires app stores to share if a user is a kid or teenager with all app developers, effectively millions of individual companies, without parental consent or rules on how the information is used, the company warned. That raises real privacy and safety risks, like the potential for bad actors to sell the data or use it for other nefarious purposes. Google emphasized that apps like weather services shouldn't need access to a user's age data. Apple and Google both mentioned that developers in Utah and Louisiana will face similar legal demands next year. Louisiana's rules are scheduled for July 1st, 2026. All three state laws require that apps accommodate age-specific experiences and integrate parental controls where necessary. Although currently limited to a few states, momentum is building at the federal level. Lawmakers, including Rep. John James, Republican, and Senator Mike Lee, another Republican, have introduced a proposal to apply similar rules nationwide. Lee argued that oversight is necessary because, quote, big tech has profited from app stores through which children in America and across the world access violent and sexual material while risking contact from online predators, end quote. Both Apple and Google already offer optional parental tools. The new mandates, however, would impose these controls by default and require age verification before any app use, even for content with no relevance to age. Privacy advocates warn that by forcing companies to gather and distribute identifying data, these state laws not only expand surveillance, but also hand tech companies an obligation that could backfire if the information is misused or exposed. As we've told you before, these are predominantly Republicans introducing these draconian laws, and it's always done under the guise of keeping children safe, although, as you saw in that article, parental controls already exist for that purpose. Now, what this is actually about is getting every single adult onto a digital ID of sorts in order to use the internet. And I can give you an example out of Australia, which is the perfect test case for something like this. In December of 2024, the Australian government introduces digital ID legislation. Despite immense pushback, they assure everyone, no, this is going to be voluntary, and they pass it anyway. Then you have things like social media age bans introduced and age assurance technology starting to be floated. And what this eventually leads to is people needing to verify themselves to even conduct a simple Google search. So again, digital ID legislation passes in December of 2024, voluntary digital ID. And as of July 10th, just a few months later, they're saying Australia is quietly introducing unprecedented age checks for search engines like Google. This is from ABC, the state-funded media over there. In short, search engines are in line for the same age assurance technology behind the teen social media age ban. The age checks will apply to logged-in users in a bid to limit children's access to content such as pornography. And it says from December 27, Google and Microsoft will have to use some form of age assurance technology on users when they sign in, or face fines of almost $50 million per breach. Australians will soon be subjected to mandatory age checks across the internet landscape, the whole internet, everyone, in what has been described as a huge and unprecedented change. And of course, this was saying that search engines would be next in line. I can confirm they are now going to be subjected to this, but it says search engines are next in line for the same controversial age assurance technology behind the teen social media ban, and other parts of the internet are likely to follow suit. The Safety Commissioner in Australia is now admitting, after a year of people arguing that the real agenda behind age assurance and age verification was in fact forcing adults to adopt a digital ID in order to use the internet, that digital ID will be a method used for that purpose. So think about this, a months-long campaign of telling parents that this was to keep their children safe and hold big tech accountable, just like Republicans are doing here, only to eventually result in mandatory digital ID, eventually in order to use the internet at all. It's the same agenda, just different faces running it, and it's now official in Texas, of all places. As you saw in the article, the same push is happening in Utah and Louisiana, which we warned about months ago. And if you want to know where this goes, well, we can tell you the immediate effects. You can't access apps or Google services without age verification, which means you must identify yourself and prove you're over a certain age. That means as an adult, you can't do online banking on an app, which impacts your ability to pay your bills, transfer money between your accounts, buy things. You can't use social media to voice your opinions or organize politically. Now you may say, okay, I'll give social media up and I'll use a different browser to Google, at least for my banking. Yes, that could be a workaround for a limited time, but eventually that activity is banned as well, because to keep kids safe, we can't allow browsers, apps, and services that don't comply with our laws, you see. VPNs eventually come under attack, as they are in Australia, and then you get to the point of the UK where you're being told you cannot work without a digital ID, which is what Real ID is all about, and that was implemented earlier this year with very little resistance because most Americans never suspected something like this would hit these shores, but it has. Now, as far as Texas goes, this legislation has to be immediately repealed. We reached out to Doc Pete Chambers, who's running for governor of Texas, and asked if he would repeal this legislation if elected as governor. We received his response and he said, quote, "Of course I would. More overreach leads to digital ID controls." So clearly he understands this issue. So Texas, if you don't want a UK-style digital dictatorship where you eventually need a digital ID to work, elect Doc Pete Chambers for governor and let everyone know that he will absolutely not stand for this type of overreach and will rectify it. You can follow him at Doc Pete Chambers on X or visit docpetechambers.org. Are you protected in a world where threats of EMPs, solar flares, 5G, and all types of EMF are interfering with our very existence? Escape the grid with Escape Zone, bringing you the highest quality Faraday technology for ultimate preparedness. Choose when and where your devices are detectable. Faraday bags protect you from EMPs, car theft, card and device skimming, identity theft, tracking, Bluetooth, and GPS. Choose from premium mobile Faraday bags, crossbody bags, laptop bags, and even women's handbags, or opt for the optimum protection with a ballistic backpack, combining cutting-edge Faraday technology with a ballistic 3A Kevlar for the ultimate protection and preparedness. Now you can also protect from EMF with their top-notch EMF beanies and blankets, shielding you from some of the most harmful frequencies in our environment. Whatever your needs are, Escape Zone has you covered, and their range is perfect for personal use, family use, or even as a gift for someone you truly care about. Visit escapezone.com/pulse and protect you and your loved ones today. That's escapezone.com/pulse.